Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of LiveFaith, where we have conversations and talk about life and faith and what all that looks like. And yeah, I don't really even know what these are, but they are what they are, and we have fun. And today I get to introduce you to my realtor. Hi, Mark.
Oh, hi, Bart.
Uh, Mark lost a whole bunch of money on me when he sold my house. Thanks for that.
My pleasure. I'd love to do it again sometime for you.
Mark is a good friend of mine. We were youth pastors together for a bunch of years up in the cities. We still stay pretty connected. I try and get him to buy me lunch every once in a while, and sometimes alligator arms. Oh, I forgot my wallet.
I've become very good at that over the years.
Wanted to invite Mark on because Mark is somebody I respect a great deal. He and I have had some really good conversations and has really helped me establish sort of my ministry direction. And Mark has gone about ministry in sort of the different path than what most people think of when they think of somebody who becomes a pastor. Mark, why don't you tell us just a little bit about how you became a youth pastor?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I'll try not to make this too long because it is a rather long story, and I do like to talk, and I'll try to not talk too much. But my wife and I, pretty much right after we got married, jumped into youth ministry as volunteers, and along my journey, I'm going to use my wife and I because we did this together, and she is such a huge part of me and a part of the ministry that I had. But we jumped into youth ministry. She was working with a girls group. I started working with a guys group called Christian Service Brigade, and then we jumped into working with the actual youth program there as volunteers. And youth pastors would come and go, and Cheryl and I were the ones that kind of stayed and ran it in the interim. And there were times where the interim became rather long. And we just hung around and ran the show. When it was the late 1990s, about 1999, our pastor came to us, Pastor Ivan Veldhuisen, and said, "Mark, you have been running the show. You've been doing this. I'd like to have you come on part-time." Now, I was selling real estate at the time, and I called him stupid. I did. I called him Pastor Stupid. I can't believe I did that, but I did because he was crazy. You need to know that, and I say this very, very humbly, is that I don't have a college degree. I don't have any kind of a ministry degree. So, to have done youth ministry for all these years without that, it's the Lord. I mean, that's the beginning and the end of the story. God is the one that got us into it. But he asked us to come on part-time, and I said, well, all right, it's kind of, we're going to continue doing what we've already been doing, and you're going to give me a little bit of a paycheck, so that's fine. About a year and a half later, he sat down and asked us to come on full-time. And I called him crazy, I think, that time. I'm not sure exactly what I said, but my wife and I went home and we talked about it and said, if we really felt if we were to say no to this call, it'd be disobedience to the Lord, and that is not a place where that we wanted to be in. So I went back to Ivan and said, "Here's the deal. We feel this is what God wants us to do at this time. You need to understand, I don't know what the package is that you're going to throw at me, and it really doesn't matter. I've been around enough youth pastors to know that I'm still going to have to sell houses in order to make a living." And he went back to our board, and they said, sell as many houses as you need to, as long as you fulfill your responsibilities. We're cool with that. And that started just a wonderful journey. I'm the kind of guy, I never grew up saying, "Gosh, I want to be this," or "I feel this is who I should be," or there was never that moment where God, I really felt he was saying, "This is what I want you to do." Be a youth pastor. It was a journey. It really was. And a lot of it started with a volunteer and attending meetings, Bart, for example, where I met you, and getting to know different people, attending Trout Lake Camp, going to the retreats and things of that nature, just solidifying some relationships that helped me along in the journey. I sit here today just humbled that I was able to do youth ministry for so many years, and very unique situation. I get it. And I have so many friends, Bart, and you're one of them, that have gone through the rigors of education and seminary. And so when I sit here and say that that wasn't my journey, I do this with a great amount of respect for you and people like you. But this is what God had planned for myself and my wife for those years, and it was good. Most of it was good. There's always moments in youth ministry where you kind of take a step back and say, really? But I tell you, I look back and then, Bart, you know this, to serve in the church that I grew up in. When does that happen? So there are women there still alive who watched me in the nursery when I was a toddler, kind of thing, and a lot of the students coming up through the youth group I've known all their life, literally all their life. There's been a few that Cheryl and I were even in their parents' weddings, which is just crazy to think about that, to be able to do youth ministry, watch a kid grow up, and then even get to the point where you get to officiate their wedding. It's just nuts. Great journey. It's a great journey.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I often thought about as you and I would talk back and forth in ministry, a lot of people think, I think their idea of, the training that goes into it, having the undergraduate and the master's degree process that I went through, compared to, just recently we put up a video like this with our mutual friend Josh Underbaki, who has part of that, but not all of it, but has that clear calling. And then, as I get to know you, and I still remember one of my favorite moments as I'm growing and figuring out how to do ministry, and it's the schooling doesn't do everything. I learned far more from interactions with people like you and Josh. I remember one time we were working through figuring out small group ministry with my youth group. And you and I were having this back and forth constantly trying to figure out the same thing, because you were doing the same thing. And I had a set of parents that came to me and said, okay, you're trying to figure this out. And it's essentially, in a nice way, they were trying to say, you're completely wrong and you need help. They might not have been wrong in that, but they said, you really should talk to Mark Thurston over at Edinburgh Church. He's got it figured out. He's got a great curriculum and you should look into it. And my response to them was, I know his curriculum is great. I've looked at it, and actually, I'm the one that gave it to Mark. It didn't work for us, but it seemed like it would work for you. And the one that I ended up using was one that you had sent to me. So that back and forth, those relational connections really end up having more of an impact on how we go about doing ministry than sitting in a classroom 5 years earlier, when everything you learn there has been outdated for 4 years. How did that sort of interaction, how does that continue with you now that you have stepped away from that vocational role? You're back doing realty, but you're still very much involved in ministry.
Well, I tell you what, the relationships that I have right now, that God blessed me with during my years in youth ministry, is really what keeps me going. Bart, I know we don't get to see each other as often as we would like to, but when we do, it's like we saw each other yesterday. We just pick up wherever we left off, and we just run with it. And I have a group of people that are the same that way. The youth pastor network that was through Converge, getting to know people there and connect, be able to ask questions, build relationships with. I was part of a local youth pastor network here, local churches, different denominations, but we did ministry and we did life together. And people like you and Josh Underbaki, to get to know him and see him go from youth pastor to the lead pastor, and then have my son-in-law work under him as a youth pastor. Just those relationships that I can't tell you how important those are now and were throughout the years of youth ministry. That's what kept me going. That's where I learned. Even though I don't have the education, I still read, I studied, I went to conferences. But I tell you what, where I gained the most traction in ministry is being able to ask questions of my peers and be able to pull stuff and not use it, explicitly, but take an idea or a concept or curriculum and then tweak it and twist it so that worked for myself, my kids, my adult leaders, and my volunteers and things like that. Those relationships, you can't put a price tag on how valuable they were during the ministry years. And honestly, those same relationships are even stronger today than they were when I was doing ministry. You do life with people, and there's a bond that's created that you just, again, is so valuable. It's crazy.
And that really stands out to me because we're talking about this youth pastor to youth pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Ministry isn't limited though to those vocational spots. I know that you are continuing to do ministry even while you're not in the job. You're doing what God has called to reach people with the gospel, connect and build relationships. And essentially the process is the same. You are average churchgoer now. It's funny to talk that way, but that's kind of what it looks like. And you're still impacting people's lives. How do you do it? You have people that you reach out to, that reach out to you, that you build up, that build up you, and that sends you then into that ministry field to do whatever God's called you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's true. And really, the fact of the matter is, if we're not doing vocation, you never retire from ministry. You retire when God calls you home, whenever that day is. So whether you're in a vocational ministry or not, you are still doing ministry. God has things for us to do. And that's something I learned throughout the course of doing ministry, is that because people would always come to me, especially as I got a little older. No comments, please. People say, well, how long are you going to be doing this? What are you going to do afterwards? And even when I had my little retirement deal at church, well, how's it feel to be retired? It's like, I'm not doing youth ministry, but I'm still doing ministry, because that's, as believers, this is what we are called to do. It is who we are called to be. You just never stop. And whether you're, whatever your vocation is, we're to be loving God and loving people no matter where we are, who we're with, or what we're doing. And that's something that was just ingrained in me throughout the years of doing ministry, that I now carry with me for as many more days or years God has for me here on earth.
So as you interact with other people in your church and you're wanting to encourage them to reach out, engage in what we're calling ministry, essentially building relationships, sharing the gospel, encouraging people to be more Christlike. What are some of the things that you tell people, encourage them in order to go out and do what they're called to do?
Well, I mean, how you ended that question is a key to go out and do what you were called to do. Church, the church is not a building. The church is people, and God has called us, as I said earlier, to love Him and love people. And so when for example, when I talk to, when I do premarital counseling, one of the first things I say is that, this relationship has got to be first and foremost, or else this won't be. In other words, your relationship as individuals with the Lord and then as a couple with the Lord has got to be first. If it's not, then any other relationships you have are going to suffer. And so it's just an encouragement. It's simple. This is biblical. Love God, love people. And it's more than just going to church on a Sunday or a Wednesday. This is a lifestyle. One of my favorite verses, but most challenging verses, is Luke 9:23. Turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross daily, and follow me. Bart, you're selfish. Believe it or not, you are. I am. All the people watching this are selfish. That's why it says, turn from your selfish ways. Take up your cross, die to yourself. The cross is a symbol of death. Daily. And it says the same thing in John, except it doesn't have the word daily in it. That's why I like the Luke version, because it's a daily decision. I have to wake up every morning to say, Lord, I'm selfish. Help me not to be. I need this day to be about you. I want it to be about you. Help me die to myself so that I can follow you the way you've asked me to do that.
Yeah, that I think, as speaking as a pastor, and looking back to when I was a youth pastor, the same idea, getting people to see that,
Mm-hmm.
that we need to get over ourselves. But then once we do that, God has a calling for us,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got some incredible things that he's enabling us to do that oftentimes we don't even realize.
Mhm.
I know I made a transition probably in large part because of our relationship and how I saw God using you. For years, I always hired a part-time youth pastor to work alongside me to run the junior high program at my church. I transitioned from recruiting students coming out of school to hiring people within the church, including one of my favorite hiring processes. I hired a grandma that had started volunteering in my youth ministry, that a bunch of the kids in my youth ministry, she had brought through the nursery. And I said, you're the one that I want in this position because you love the kids, you love God. And I know that when the kids look at you in youth group, they're going to see Jesus and you're going to encourage them to be closer to Jesus. And that's exactly what I want. And
Mhm.
she said the same thing that you said to Pastor Ivan. You're stupid and you're crazy. And I said, you're not wrong, but I still want you in the position. And she was one of the most powerful youth leaders that I had, simply because, like you say, she had that heart and she just engaged and loved as God had called her to.
If you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, you will have everything you need to love on people. It's that simple to say. I know it's hard to do, but it really is that simple.
Yeah, we've said this before. It's that in a sense, it's the same as a small business mindset where you kind of got to get over that I can't hump.
Mhm.
And once you do that, you've released all of the things that you're holding back, and you can see more clearly, not always clearly, but more clearly, some of the incredible things that God has in store for us and the powerful work that he can do when we get out of the way and we let him work. Those are good thoughts.
I love the pause.
Sometimes, we preach this stuff to ourselves constantly. And
Oh,
sometimes
you have to. I mean, you have to keep going.
putting it into words, makes an impact, even as you're using your own words. Thanks for taking the time to do this with me, Mark. I think some really great thoughts came out. To close this up, could you give us one closing piece of encouragement or thought as to how we can live out our faith in our day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think there's three things that come to mind. Number one is love God first and always. It is so easy to get distracted, to have our attentions and our loyalties go elsewhere. It's kind of interesting during this whole COVID-19 thing, and I'm sure many have thought about this and talked about it. How the stage has kind of been swept clean. There's with the sports, the entertainment, finances, even churches, which can be idols. Everything's kind of been swept clean, and maybe God is saying, "Hey, I need to be number one." This is a reminder. But that's number one. We need to love God first and always. He's got to be our first love. Um, Secondly, realizing that people aren't our enemies. We are fighting a spiritual battle, not against flesh and blood. We have a great enemy, 1 Peter 5:8. We have a great enemy. Our great enemy says, watch out, be alert, for our great enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion waiting to devour or prey. So other people are not our enemies. There's spiritual warfare. It's a real thing. Be aware of that and realize that other people aren't our enemies, but there's an enemy that is trying to get us to go at each other. I think understanding that will be helpful. And then third is never forget the cross. Never forget what Jesus did for you, not just at Easter time or Holy Week, but throughout the course of the year. I have a few years ago, I went with my youngest son. We got tattoos together on his birthday, and one of the two that I got was a simple wooden cross. And I did that. I always thought if I wanted to get a tattoo, that's what I wanted. And the reason is I want to be able to look down at my arm and always remember the cross. Just a simple wooden cross, but it has so much significance. It is so much more than just a wall hanging or a beautiful necklace around your neck. It is a symbol of death. Our Savior died on it. He bled on it. His flesh was torn apart because of it, but for the joy set before him, he endured that because of me. And I never, ever want to forget that. And so I guess if I could leave you with those three things, that's what I want to do.
Amen. I asked for one, I got three, but I'll take them. They were good.
You can edit. You can edit them out if you want.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate your time. Thank all of you for tuning in for another episode of Live Faith. We'll see you next time. God bless you. And Mark, say goodbye.
Hey, goodbye. Hey, take care, Bart, and punch him in the arm when you see him for me, all right? And then give him a kiss on the cheek. Thanks, church.